Tariffs, taxes on imported goods, are among the oldest and most influential tools in a nation's economic arsenal. For centuries, governments have used tariffs not only to collect revenue, but also to shape the flow of goods across their borders, influencing what people buy and sell. By making foreign products more expensive, tariffs aim to protect domestic industries and jobs. When imported goods cost more, local manufacturers can compete more easily, and workers in those industries may feel more secure in their employment. Tariffs also generate government revenue, which can be used to fund public services or infrastructure. Beyond that, they serve as powerful leverage in international negotiations, giving countries bargaining chips when discussing trade agreements or resolving disputes. But tariffs can disrupt supply chains, raise costs for businesses, and lead to higher prices for consumers. When companies face higher costs for imported materials or products, the effects ripple through the economy, sometimes causing shortages or delays. Companies must choose between absorbing these costs or passing them on, often fueling inflation. For small businesses, these decisions can be especially tough, as profit margins shrink and customers become more price-sensitive. Shifts in tariff policy can force businesses to overhaul supply chains, sometimes at great expense. Companies may need to find new suppliers, reroute shipments, or even relocate factories to avoid higher tariffs, all of which require time and investment. While some domestic industries benefit from reduced competition, others that rely on imported parts or materials may suffer. Consumers too often pay more for everyday goods, from electronics to groceries, as higher costs work their way through the supply chain. Retaliatory tariffs from other countries can escalate into trade wars, slowing global growth and straining relations between nations. These disputes can last for years, affecting everything from agriculture to technology, and sometimes leading to long-term shifts in global alliances. The decision to impose or remove tariffs creates a complex web of winners and losers, both at home and abroad. Every change in policy sends ripples through industries, communities, and even households, shaping the economic landscape in ways that are often unpredictable. This is why tariffs remain a contentious and powerful force in global commerce, one that quietly shapes the choices of businesses, governments, and consumers around the world every single day. The Trump administration broke with decades of free trade policy, launching sweeping tariffs in 2025. A baseline 10% tariff was imposed on most imports, with even higher rates for countries like China. The administration claimed these measures would fix trade imbalances, revive manufacturing, and protect national security. Emergency powers were invoked to bypass Congress, sparking legal and political controversy. Businesses relying on imports faced soaring costs, while small firms struggled to adapt. Major corporations reported weaker demand and logistical chaos. Retaliation from trading partners triggered a global tit-for-tat, disrupting markets and supply chains. The trade gap showed mixed results, and the World Trade Organization was largely sidelined. The real battle, however, was over the president's authority to act alone. The administration's decision to impose unilateral tariffs sent shockwaves through the legal and political landscape, and it wasn't long before the matter landed in federal court. This move set the stage for a high-stakes constitutional showdown, pitting the executive branch against those who questioned the limits of presidential power. At the heart of the dispute was a fundamental question. Did the president truly have the authority to impose sweeping tariffs on foreign goods without explicit approval from Congress? This issue struck at the core of the separation of powers, raising concerns about the balance between the legislative and executive branches. The administration pointed to the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, as its legal foundation. Originally, IEPA was crafted to give the president tools to respond to specific targeted national emergencies, such as threats from hostile foreign actors or sudden international crises, not to serve as a blanket justification for broad changes in trade policy. Nevertheless, the administration argued that persistent economic threats like growing trade deficits and unfair trade practices amounted to national emergencies under IEPA. They claimed these economic challenges posed risks to national security and justified swift executive action. In response, a broad coalition of states, business groups, and legal experts banded together to challenge the president's actions. They filed lawsuits, arguing that the executive branch had overstepped its constitutional bounds and usurped powers that rightfully belonged to Congress. The U.S. Court of International Trade reviewed the case and ultimately ruled against the administration. finding that the use of IEEPA in this context exceeded the president's legal authority. However, the administration quickly appealed the decision, determined to defend its interpretation of the law. When the case reached the Federal Circuit Court, judges expressed deep skepticism about the administration's broad use of IEEPA for imposing tariffs. They questioned whether economic policy disputes truly constituted national emergencies as envisioned by the law. With the stakes so high, not just for the separation of powers but for the future of global commerce and America's role in the world economy, the case seemed destined for the Supreme Court, where a final precedent-setting decision would be made. The outcome would not only determine the limits of executive authority in trade, but also shape the balance of power between the branches of government for years to come. Before the Supreme Court, two visions of executive power clashed. Plaintiffs argued that only Congress can set broad trade policy, and that IEEPA was never meant for sweeping tariffs. They invoked the major questions doctrine. Major economic decisions require clear congressional approval. The administration countered that IEEPA gave the president broad authority to act in national emergencies, including economic threats. They warned that limiting executive power would weaken America's ability to respond to global challenges. The court faced a choice: constitutional restraint or executive agility in a crisis. August 6, 2025, the Supreme Court struck down the Trump-era tariffs, ruling the administration had exceeded its authority. The majority opinion reaffirmed that only Congress can set broad trade policy and levy taxes. The court found IEEPA was never intended as a tool for sweeping economic protectionism. Chronic trade deficits and industrial decline, it ruled, are not emergencies justifying unilateral action. The decision did not judge the tariffs' wisdom, but the process by which they were enacted. The ruling returns tariff authority to Congress, sharply limiting future presidents' ability to act alone. It marks a pivotal moment in the balance of power over trade. With the tariffs struck down by the Supreme Court, a seismic shift ripples through the world of international trade. The decision reverberates from Washington to Wall Street, and from factory floors to shipping docks across the globe. Billions of dollars paid by importers over the past months and years are now suddenly subject to refund claims. For many companies, this represents not just a potential windfall, but also a logistical and legal challenge of enormous scale. The process of securing refunds will be complex and slow, involving layers of bureaucracy and a mountain of paperwork. Importers must navigate a maze of forms, deadlines, and eligibility requirements, all while their cash flow hangs in the balance. Each claim will require detailed documentation and careful government review. While businesses welcome the prospect of relief from the financial burden, the uncertainty and delays add new complications to their financial planning and day-to-day operations. Executives and financial analysts now face tough decisions as they try to forecast revenue and manage risk in an environment where the rules have suddenly changed. Meanwhile, the administration is forced to rethink its entire trade strategy. With broad tariff powers now off the table, policymakers must search for new ways to protect domestic industries and respond to global competition. Only more limited tools such as national security tariffs or targeted measures remain available. The loss of sweeping executive authority marks a dramatic change in how the U.S. can influence international trade. Industries that once relied on tariff protections must now adapt quickly, while customs officials and border agents adjust to new protocols and shifting priorities. Global markets are left in a state of uncertainty, as businesses and trading partners around the world anxiously await America's next move. The stakes are high, and the ripple effects could be felt for years to come. Companies must now decide whether to revert their supply chains to pre-tariff routes, invest in new strategies, or simply wait for further clarity from Washington. Every option carries risk and potential reward. The ruling is widely seen as a win for rules-based trade and international cooperation, reaffirming the importance of legal frameworks in global commerce. Yet, the path forward remains unclear. Uncertainty clouds the horizon, and both businesses and governments must proceed with caution. The United States must now rely on negotiation and legislation rather than executive fiat to shape its trade policy. This shift could mean more debate, compromise, and unpredictability in the months ahead. Around the world, governments, investors, and ordinary citizens watch closely to see how America will navigate this new and uncertain landscape, knowing that the choices made here will echo far beyond its borders. The Supreme Court's decision reshapes American trade policy, shifting power back to Congress. Future presidents will need to negotiate with lawmakers for major tariff changes. This could bring more stability and predictability for businesses and trading partners. Congressional approval means slower, more transparent policy shifts, but it may also limit the president's ability to act quickly in trade disputes. The challenge now is whether Congress can craft effective trade policy in a divided political climate. The executive may seek new legal avenues, risking further legal battles. One thing is clear: the rules of American trade have changed. The Supreme Court's ruling will ripple from Washington to the checkout counter. Businesses burdened by tariffs may see relief and potential refunds, boosting investment. Domestic industries face renewed competition as protection fades. Consumers could benefit from lower prices on imported goods, easing inflation. The decision signals a U.S. return to more predictable, rules-based trade. Allies and markets welcome the shift, but uncertainty remains as new policies take shape. Ultimately, the ruling reaffirms that even the most powerful economic tools are subject to law and constitutional balance.